It's the final lap, and our last conversation for this morning is all things moving on from long term relationships. We're speaking about the difficulties that are associated with it. And to assist us with this conversation, relationship and life coach Luzuko Nobongoza joins us now on the line. A very good morning to you, Luzuko. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Hey, good morning, spirituality.
I'm not too sure once we get into this conversation. You know, I've been doing fine for the past couple of hours. This one is personal. Why, Vele
Yeah,
Vele?
yeah.
Why?
I think a lot of us can relate to this. It's really quite relatable, to be honest. And there's no real formula that one has conjured up for this in terms of how to
Yeah.
deal with it. But anyway, here we are.
I think that's the worst part about it, that it's not a one size fits all. You know,
No,
breakups are
absolutely.
painful no matter what brings them about.
Hmm.
Some of them come with a spark of element, and you're like, how that just happened? Some of them you can actually see it all piecing together, boiling down to that really burning and breaking point where you get to say, I've been waiting for this moment. So here's the
Yeah.
moment. The breakup is happening, and you are going through this tough time of obviously trying to recollect yourself. There's various emotions fluctuating between individuals. Maybe, Luzuko, let me start by asking you this. Do you think breakups actually vary from genders, our actions?
Inter- That's a very interesting question.
Mm.
Yeah, I think if you look at, I'm just as you asked the question, I'm reflecting on myself now that how have I dealt with my
Yeah,
breakups
self-reflection. I
before.
love that.
Yeah, I think what tends to happen, of course, there's phases in this breakup cycle. What tends to happen specifically from a male perspective is that initially we almost feel like, okay, let's just move on because you know what, I've always had this individual that I could call at any given time, and here I am, I'm free. Let me get out there. But I think for the females in the main, the issues has always been you sit down, you sob, you cry for a time, and then it takes long for you to heal, which is probably the best thing when you are within it yourself, you're looking inside, you're reflecting on stuff, and then eventually, as time goes, you start to heal. But what happens with the guys, we tend to get to that phase at a much later on, at a much later stage, because we almost pretend as if nothing has happened because you know what? Anyway, I've got a list of people that I can date at any time that I want. You know, I've got suitors that I've always wanted to go for. So hey, I'm gonna go for that initially, and then later on, when you realize, you know what, I actually lost the love of my life, then you start getting into that space of trying to reflect what actually happened, what could I have done
Mm.
better, and so on. So I think that's the sort of the nuances and the differences between the two in terms of the gender.
And then what the other gender does is that they interfere when you have moved on, because Bona, it took them too long to find the
Exactly.
peace.
Because I've been saying so long, thinking, playing hero. Yeah.
Now the breakup happens for different roles, different
Yeah.
genders. There's obviously some changes. There's changing needs and priorities as well. How do you then find the center of yourself amongst all of these
Mhm.
changes, the main priorities that you now need to look into?
Yeah. I think for any breakup, whatever the reason might have been, I think the very first phase that one needs to do, which is predominantly what ladies usually do, is to reflect, like stop and reflect. What actually happened here, right? Why did it happen? Could I have contributed to this, or is it a question of we couldn't relate? Was it a communication issue between myself and my ex-partner? If I had an opportunity to change things, how could I have changed things? And I think if one goes through that phase of reflection and asking these questions, right, it 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 starts creating sort of like an internal communication. You are literally going through emotions, and you allow yourself also to cry and acknowledge that there's now a void, right? And when there's that void, you need to fill it up with certain activities that you can do by yourself. And as you go through, that's when you sort of start to rediscover who you are, right? And you start filling up that void with things that you really like doing, right? And start pondering about the things that, for example, you would want in a new relationship, what you could change, right? If I had to pick it up again, assuming with the same person, if I had to change things the way that my past relationship was, and this is assuming it was a long-term relationship, what could I have done better? And I think with all of those, that reflection and the healing process itself, and in rediscovering yourself, then it's easier for me personally to say, from that point onwards, you're always looking to yourself, and that for me is important, because I think what happens in a breakup predominantly is that you lose yourself, right, in the breakup, because essentially in a relationship, the longer you stay in it, you almost get lost in who you are, because you've now building this new persona with the person that you're dating. So after the breakup, you need to sort of rediscover who Luzuko is, who Pretty is.
And then there's the stage of depression. After all of
Yeah.
that, there's a stage of depression.
Mm.
You know, now you're at a point where obviously there's this breakup depression, or at least a deep sadness inside of you. The realization starts to hit. Your everyday life patterns are starting to change. You need to now learn how to live without the person who you had been saying, texting every day, I can't breathe without you. And
Yeah.
seemingly you face the reality that you can breathe without them. You just need to navigate your way. Take me through this depression phase, and how long should one actually dwell in it before pulling themselves out of it?
Yeah. I think one of the important things, Pretty, as we chat about that one, is it's important to acknowledge that a healing process from any relationship that has broken down is not linear, as we talk about it. That you must start here and reflect, and then you must heal, start to recover yourself, rediscover yourself, and what tends to happen is you go through these phases literally as they happen. One day you are reflecting, you're feeling well. The next day something has actually triggered you. That takes you back to those deep thoughts and that feeling of void and so on. So it's important for me that when someone is going through that stage of depression, to realize that it's a really phase. You are going to get triggers, right? You might be watching a movie that you guys used to watch together, and you loved talking through that movie as a couple. But now here's the same movie coming up, and the person that you used to engage about in this movie is not here anymore. Suddenly you get hit with thoughts, right? You start reflecting on the emotions of this void that has now been left by that partner. So for me, I think in those spaces, it's really important to be very kind and patient with yourself, understanding that this process is iterative. It's not as linear. You will at some point feel like, you know what, it's been 6 months, right? And I feel better, but something really triggers you, and it almost takes you back to the beginning. But it's not that it's taking you back to your beginning; it's just the phases that are dynamic in their nature, so it's not as linear. So for me, I think it's very important to be cognizant of this very dynamic space that you're going through and the emotions that you feel as you go through it. And there's no time. There's really no time.
I
There's
love
no
that you
give,
mentioned that.
give it 6 months and it's going to feel better. No, for me, I would say you will know, right? It's different for every person. You will know when those specific triggers don't give you the same fed sinking emotion that actually I am getting better as a person. I can now leave without thinking. I can sit with my phone, look at this number if you still have it on your phone, and I can even decide to delete it. You know what I mean? And I think it's those moments when you realize that actually I am healing and I'm able to start to move on.
Luzo, you must also tell them not to call a person if you've broken up with them. You don't call them. There's no favors in this world.
Yeah, that's like a big. That's probably the biggest trap. Especially text-driven communication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a phone call. You can sit in a phone call and be very discreet. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, even if you really want to engage, but you can because you are thinking about the emotions and the disappointment, depending how you broke up. So in a call, you can be extremely discreet. The trouble is text-based communications, because there you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 hours after that communication, you can still look at it and say, "Hey, I love how we're communicating." You start conjuring up what you to say next. You text, you delete, you text, you delete, you send. You think about it. Oh, shucks, I shouldn't have said that. Think about what to say next, and you start texting. Then you are literally re-engaging with this individual. So I would say for me, avoid any text-based communication, because those one will get you into spaces that you maybe don't want to get to. And you're really re-engaging with an individual with a lot of thoughts behind.
Acceptance is a very cruel monster that is very difficult to adapt. It
Yeah.
it can take a very long time. How does one build up the courage to accept now your new normal? You've gone through your changes of needs and priorities. You've
Yeah.
gone through your depression. Now you've reached a point of acceptance, and you need to start working out means and ways of creating a new normal, and life must go on, whether you like it or not. That's the sad
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. I think acceptance is it's probably the biggest part, and usually, like I said, this thing is not linear. You will find that with all the events and the emotions that you're going through, first of all, you need to accept that this person is not here, right? And this person might actually never be here again, right? Even if you feel that it can, maybe we can work it out, but you almost need to almost think that this person might never be there, almost as if the person is past, right? So that's the difficulty with acceptance. It's that I might never be able to actually re-engage with this person. So you almost have to kind of clean your hard drive and say, okay, this person is not here. That's for me step number one in terms of acceptance. Then the second thing is to deal with all these trigger moments, right? That would come unannounced at any given point. It can come in a public space. It can come at work. Someone says something, and it triggers those emotions. You remember certain things, but it's really the acceptance that I am actually an individual, fully autonomous outside of that individual or the ex-partner. And I think that type of acceptance, I know it's a bit difficult to even comprehend, but you really need to start thinking as an individual who is pretty. All right, define who you are, understand who you are, and in that process of rediscovering yourself, you need to rediscover yourself outside of someone else. I know that human beings by nature need to have these companionships, right? But at some point, you need to find time just with yourself so that you can learn again who is Uluzuko, right? Without saying Uluzuko is a husband, Uluzuko is a father, Uluzuko is a, all right? Yeah, Uluzuko is someone who's strong. You need to start saying those things, affirm yourself in terms of your abilities, your gifts, and so on. Then it's easier to start accepting that that ex-partner does not play a role anymore in your life. But I think for me, without you being the epicenter of what's happening, so being the priority, elevating yourself, putting yourself in the pedestal, if you can't get to that point, it's so difficult to accept the changes. Very difficult.
Here's a spanner in the works, right? We've been discussing for the past 20 minutes or so. We've been discussing a very nuclear relationship.
Yeah.
The idea of bringing in an offspring. Now you have a child together in this equation.
Yeah.
And you still need to go your separate ways. I don't know if maybe the steps would necessarily be the same. You are the expert. But also, remember that now, as much as we spoke about establishing boundaries with your ex, where you keep the communication very minimal, it must be very mature, it must be healthy. Here's a child now that has been brought into this relationship, obviously out of love. How do we then make sure that we keep the main thing, prioritizing the child, but still going through our own differences? Because at this point, there's no way that we cannot communicate.
Yeah, that's a tough question, and probably for people who have kids who are married and they've been together for 15 years. They've built a routine. When we wake up, this is what you do. You bath the kids, you prepare the lunch, and co-parenting. It becomes really difficult because there's a sense, like you say, you can't disengage. It's almost impossible to do it because the moment you completely disengage, there's another element which is your offspring that will one, just by them being there, will present you that point of remember there is this partner, there is this partner. You can't divorce yourself out of them, meaning your offspring. So they'll always bring you those memories. But the trick thing with an offspring is you need to find, and usually it requires a lot of maturity for the two parties, the exes now, to sit down and define those boundaries together and also define how do we re-engage or how do we engage and do the co-parenting together in a way that you don't create the sense that we need each other again. You know what I mean? So you need to literally think about it. When do you come see the kids? When do I come drop the kids? Times. So you start really becoming like a robotic type of partnership where everything is pre-communicated. That Friday is 5 o'clock, come pick up the kids, right? Or between 5 and 6, pick up the kids. Bring them back on Sunday at this time. So that everything is pretty much very structured. There's no, I'm outside here, right? I'm here to drop the kids, and I didn't even say it. So you can't work that way where things are haphazard. So it requires a lot of thinking about the structure, how we're going to communicate the rules of engagement, and that's probably the most difficult part because remember now you're not really in that space where you were fluid, you could negotiate things nicely, laugh about them, but now there's tension, right? There's one is going through reflection, the other person is starting to re-engage and enjoy their lives. They're different phases. Maybe I come through with my new partner, right, to pick up the kids. How does my ex-wife feel now that, oh, Lulu is here to pick up the kids with his current girlfriend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be an acknowledgement of that space because maybe we should say that when you come pick up the kids, come alone. Don't come with your partner. Even if you have a partner and my kids are exposed to your partner, but maybe when you pick up, just acknowledge the fact that I might be going through certain things, and if I see someone else there, it just doesn't make that 2 minutes of exchange when you say, okay, take the kids, bring the kids back, pleasant, right? You want to make it as pleasant as possible, even though that things are really not that pleasant. So for me, it's really the process of discussing the rules of engagement post the breakup,
Yeah.
and everything has to be centered about what's best for the offspring. It can't be about now ourselves anymore.
Sure. Yeah, no.
That's a tough one. That's
Yeah,
a
it
very
is.
tough
It's
one.
definitely a tough one. I honestly commend people that have actually mastered the art of co-parenting to a
Yeah,
point of where it's just smooth sailing. I want to quickly
yeah.
go because my time is up. I want to quickly go to the moving on part.
Mm,
Sometimes we think we are ready to move on. Sometimes we move on and realize 2 months into the relationship that actually it's
nah.
not really it. It's the reality. It unfortunately is the reality
Mm.
of what we go through when we are divorcing the long-term relationship that we have had. But when does one then know when they are ready to move on? Are you allowed to make these rookie mistakes of moving on, but also not realizing that you're actually not ready? And
Mm.
the idea of not constantly comparing to what once was the love of your life.
And that last part is probably the trick, the comparison. I mean, you might not vocalize it, but in your mind you're thinking, shucks, man, oh, Pretty was never going to be doing this. And here you are now with interview saying, and you're thinking, if Pretty was here, she wouldn't have done this. Or the other way, if Luzuko was here, he wouldn't have done this. He could have done this differently. So it's all in your mind. And I think when it gets to that engage, I call it the engage and enjoy phase, where you really need to start engaging with individuals outside of yourself. Because after you've kind of dealt with your demons in terms of the acceptance and the reflection and so on, there's a phase that you really need to start getting outside. Go to the gym, right? Do things that you like outside of the house, right? And in that space, now you've seen someone that you think is a potential. I think one of the things that one can do, also depending on the maturity, is to discuss your previous relationships. I know some people say don't bring previous relationships into the space, but I think when you don't do it and you are actually avoiding those conversations completely, in your mind you will have those conversations. My previous ex could have done this better, or we could have been doing this. This is how we used to approach it. But now because you've maybe set a boundary that we don't talk about exes, now you have all of those thoughts all in your mind, and that for me is a bit dangerous. So I would say, depending on the maturity, actually when you start to re-engage and enjoy life with someone else, it might be still at a courting phase. Allow yourselves to talk about where you're coming from. Because I think in those conversations, you're also able to engage and see and suss out that is this partner mature enough to handle the wreck that I am, or the recovering person that I am. Because you need someone also, the person that you're going to engage with now, needs to understand where you're coming from and what triggers you, right? So that they are able to handle and build a new thing with yourself. So for me, critical to have open and honest conversations about where you're coming from so that you can start to build a new way going forward.
Luzuko, thank you so much for your time. A great conversation, not enough time for us to unpack, but I think the gist of everything else has been really grasped this morning. Thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
And that's Luzuko Nobongoza, relationship and life coach, giving us some step-by-step insight to follow when it comes to dealing with moving on from long-term relationships. And we know how these things go. The most fortunate people are the ones that found their soulmates in high school and lived happily ever after. Trying to find true love in this day and age is really looking for a needle in a haystack. So good luck to everyone who's trying to find love. And if you do have love, I urge you to respect it, honor it, and treasure it. It's tough out here. 3:00 is your time. Officially coming to the end of the show. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for entertaining us while we also keep you company as well. It has been lovely. Happy Thursday. My name is Pretty Ngwenya, across all social media platforms where we get to catch up during the course of the day and the course of the week. It's PRETTIE_Ngwenya. Thank you so much to Usbu, technical producer, Hendrika, the producer of the show as well. Tomorrow is another day between the hours of 12 until 3. Let's meet then. Ngwenya is coming up next.